So my grandmother got her visa, and she told my great-grandfather that she was leaving. And she booked her ferry, and I don't know how that went down in those days. It would have been 1930. So she got on a ferry to America, and she tells it that she stood on, the deck of the ship, and they had streamers, and they threw them down to their family members. Now, I don't know if her dad caught the streamer or her sisters, or I'm not really sure. But she said that, somebody in her family caught the streamer. And as the ship sailed away, the streamers broke. And again, my grandmother loved telling the story. And she also might have embellished a little bit. I don't know, because I wasn't there. But I love that part of it, and thinking of the streamer just breaking. That was the very last time that she saw her father. She didn't return to Scotland again until many years later, 50 years later. I'm sure she wrote to her dad and, things like that. Her mother died when she was 16, so she didn't leave her mother. She just left her father. But two of her sisters ended up following her to America. In fact, her youngest sister, Jean, was living in England with her husband, and they had kids by the time they came to America. And they came to America because of their son. He had eczema that was really bad, and they needed to be in a drier climate, I guess. So at any rate, my grandparents had 3 children. My mother is the middle, yeah. My aunt is the oldest, and my uncle is the youngest. And they had a brilliant life. My grandfather was an aeronautical engineer, so he was literally a rocket scientist. He loved Jesus way more than I could ever even describe. They were married almost 50 years. And I get a little bit confused on the math with my mother. I don't have all the details, but about 50 years. I thought it was 54. So what do I know? My grandfather had a stroke in 1968. He was 68 years old, and he eventually lost all capacity. And that's how I knew him, because I was born in 1968. So by the time I started talking and understanding, he could no longer communicate, not really. And so she took care of him for 16 years. He never went into a nursing home. My grandmother got her LPN, and she says, I know that the Lord had me get that LPN because he knew what was in my future. He knew I was going to have to take care of my husband. And that's what she did. She never went into the nursing field. She never did anything with that LPN except for take care of my grandfather. And she did a damn good job of it. She loved him tremendously. He loved her. It was very apparent. He died in 1984. He was 84 years old. And before he died, my mother and all of her siblings and some of my cousins sat around and sang hymns to him, and he just didn't want to let go. But when he did finally let go, the coroner came to the house. It was at my aunt and uncle's house in Virginia, and picked him up, and my grandmother ran through the house to put socks on my grandfather's feet. She lived for 16 years after Grandpa died. And she, too, at the very end, had strokes and had really just forgotten. I remember seeing her at the nursing home, and I was feeding her, and it was like she was looking right through me. She didn't know who I was anymore. And then the day before she died, my aunt and uncle went to visit her, and she had all this clarity. She was talking to this guy about this dog that they used to have, and she was in the mindset that they still had that dog, and it had been many years since Becky had died. But she was talking to this guy who had a golden retriever, and Aunt Margot said it was just so beautiful. It was like she was so clear. And that night she had a massive stroke, and her hands came up and her feet curled, and it's called something I can't remember, but it's massive brain damage, and she died. And I remember going to her nursing home, and it was raining, and my aunt and my mom and I stood there and watched them take my grandma down out to the hearse, and they had covered her in a velvet wrap, and she kind of had a big nose, so the velvet was bent just ever so slightly to show the, her nose. I said, "Is that her nose?" And Margot said, "Yeah, I think it is." And then I remember Margot saying, it's a good night to die. And that's how their love story ended. She never married anybody else. She said she had one man, and that's all she ever needed. And there are so many stories that I could, filter through there. I just wanted to, kind of tell the beginning to the end, and this is turning out to be a little bit longer video. But I will tell you one thing. They loved the Lord more than anybody I know, and they walked the walk and were beautiful people. And I am so thankful that I knew them. They were cool.